Ferndale City Council meeting for Monday, June 10th, 2013. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Council members Galloway.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Yana. Here. Lennon.
Here.
Mayor Coulter.
Here. Thank you. We are all here this evening. The next item of business would be the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda this evening?
Yes, I would like to add an item D to regular agenda for a resolution for City Council consideration of I-75, I-94 highway expansion.
All right. We'll add that as item D if that's amenable to council. Any other changes or additions to the agenda this evening?
I move that we accept the agenda as amended. Support.
Moved by Martin, supported by Lennon. Any discussion on the agenda? Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Council members Galloway.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Lennon.
Yes.
Yana.
Yes.
Mayor Coulter.
Yes, thank you. The agenda is adopted as amended. Next item of business would be call to audience. Call to audience is 30 minutes now and more time if needed at the end of the meeting for anyone in the audience to speak on any topic that they would like that's not on the agenda. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address and come on up to the mic. Good evening, Jeannie.
Hi, Jeannie Davis, President of the Ferndale Seniors. I have just a couple announcements about what we seniors are doing. The day after tomorrow, Wednesday, June 12th, we're having Sparrow come and talk to us. She's a free spirit, earth tourist kind of person. She's known throughout Ferndale, and she's spoken all through the country. And she's going to speak to us on getting more out of your life, something all of us are interested in. Everybody is welcome to come. It's free. It's not just seniors. So please come. It starts at 11 o'clock Wednesday the 12th at the Kulik Center. And 2 weeks from then, on the 26th, we're hosting the Royal Oak Handbell Choir, which sounds kind of off the wall, but they're really amazing. We've had them a couple times, and they play all over. There's like, I think 30 of them, and it's really amazing what they do. So, and I'd also like to thank all my senior volunteers who showed up and made it such a pleasure at the Trunk and Treasure Show on Saturday.
Did you make some good money?
Nowhere near as good as FernCare did, but we did okay. And the important thing is we little old ladies had a good time.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Glad to hear it. Anyone else like to address council this evening? Good evening.
Good evening. Quick evening tonight. All right. First off, Christina Shepard, DCS Ferndale DDA. I wanted just to mention a couple quick things on behalf of the DDA. Reminder that Art Town, the event fundraiser, is coming up June 21st from 6 to 9 p.m. Will be held at the Rust Belt Market. Tickets are on sale. They're $20. You can get them at the DDA. Also, many of our board members actually have them for sale, and they're selling the tickets. So hope to see everybody there. Should be a good, fun event, entertainment, lots of good food, silent auction and live auction. And so you can expect some interesting and fun art to be had that evening. Also, this week and or next week, you'll see from the DDA, there will be surveyors out on the street. We're in the start of conducting our market analysis. So you'll see they're hired by the DDA. They'll be out there asking basic questions, where you're coming from in terms of where you live, where you're going to for shopping or dining, and some other general questions that will help us to hone in a little bit more in terms of who our market is and where we want to go. Also coming soon, you'll see some on-street bike racks. Can't give you a date yet, but you should see them soon. And we also want to congratulate Ferndale Pride on a great event. Lots of activity and weather held out, which was awesome. So I'm really excited about that as well. And then last but not least, How the West Was Won update. So We do have some changes for this week, and for those of you who receive our text alerts or email blasts, you'll have noticed that. But because of the rain, things are being delayed. So coming up this week, oops, sorry, I'm just pulling this up. Tomorrow, you should see South Livernois and Pinecrest connections happening, which would affect businesses and properties along Livernois from 9 Mile to Albany. So that includes the fire department. Okay. Just looking over. As well as Din Auto Repair and Quality Car Wash. Also, you can expect then additional delays for the remaining for the remainder of the week. So North Livernois will actually be attached either Wednesday or Thursday. That shutdown would affect residents that live and are connected on Livernois, but going north from 9 Mile up to Camborne. We haven't been able to directly identify which homes might be affected, but we just want to let everybody know in general that that might be the case. They'll be up to 6 hours. So do have extra buckets of water sitting around so you can flush your toilet or brush your teeth, whatever that might be. So, and you will receive a notice at your property if you are to be affected. Other than that, you'll start to see smaller things starting to happen. Curb work is going in. Electrical conduit will begin. So this will be, it might seem a little quieter, not as big a trucks out there all the time, but there be, rest assured, there'll still be a lot of activity going on for the streetscape project. And one last item I just would like to mention with that, there has been a couple questions from concerned residents, which is always good to see everybody's on their toes. But you'll notice sometimes there are hoses that are running water. That is intentional. That is for bacteria testing. What they're doing is flushing the lines to remove air and bacteria in order to do the testing and make the connections live at that point in time. So we have received a few emails and phone calls regarding it, so we appreciate everyone's input and concern, and that is definitely the reason why. So other than that, just want to open it up to any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I don't. I just want to continue to commend you for the texts and emails and everything that I get with updates. I certainly feel very well informed as things progress. So thank you for all that.
Good. You're welcome. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. All right, thanks. Anyone else like to address council this evening?
Greg Polika, on behalf of the Ferndale Community Foundation. Since Christina mentioned Ferndale Pride, I did want to do a quick comment that it was a huge success. We want to thank all our volunteers, our sponsors, the vendors. It was a questionable day, but ultimately the weather was really, really good. But we will have a more formal report at the next council meeting when we will also be distributing funds for grants. So,
excellent. Thank you. And congratulations on the event. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda is items that council considers routine, and we enact in one motion unless anything is removed from the consent agenda. But first, let me take a moment to read the consent agenda this evening. Item A is the approval of the minutes of the regular and special meetings held May 28, 2013. B is the approval to confirm the reappointment of Greg Polika to the Police and Fire Board for a term ending May 1st, 2014. C is the approval to pay the Michigan Municipal League dues totaling $7,167 for fiscal year 2013 and 14 to be charged to the City Council membership and dues account. D is the approval of the agreement with Republic Parking for up to 90 days for a flat fee of $2,000 per month charged to the Auto Parking Fund. E is the approval of a license agreement amendment with Dino Drop, Inc. for the extended outdoor cafe area use on the pedestrian alley for June 19th, 2013, and for authorization for the mayor to sign said agreement. F is the approval of a license agreement with John D. Bistro for the extended outdoor cafe area use on the pedestrian alley for September 8th, 2013, and also authorization for the mayor to sign the agreement. G is the approval of the traffic signal maintenance agreement for the intersection of 9 Mile and Republic Street, and authorization for the director of the Public Works to execute the agreement. H is the approval of the scope of service provided by Greenway Collaborative, charged to Auto Parking Fund, and authorization for the mayor to execute the contract in the amount of $52,160, subject to the conditions stipulated by the city attorney. I, approval for listed accounts to be charged as a lien against the respective properties and to be collected as special assessments with the July 1st, 2013 tax roll as submitted by our finance director. J, approval to pay the Overhead Door West commercial invoice for $3,375 charged to the repair and maintenance account. K, approval of a contract with Waterway of Michigan to conduct hose and ladder testing for $4,018.75. And finally, approval of the bills and payrolls as submitted by the city manager's office, subject to the review of the council finance committee. What is council's pleasure on the consent agenda this evening?
Your Honor, I'd like to remove item D, approval of agreement with Republic Parking.
All right.
Your Honor, I would like to remove 5H, the Greenway Collaborative Contract.
All right. D and H removed to the regular agenda. Is there a motion on the remaining consent agenda?
I'd move that we accept the consent agenda item, removing items D and H as proposed.
I support.
Moved by Martin, supported by Piana. Is there any discussion from council on the consent agenda? Or from the public? If not, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Martin?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. The consent agenda as modified is approved. Moving on to the regular agenda, item A, consideration of assessing services contract with Oakland County. April, is that going to be you?
Actually, Jane Marie Eubanks
Jane Marie?
is the finance director. She'd be here to answer any questions and offer you information.
Come on up, Jane Marie.
Basically, the county is offering to renew our assessing contract for the fiscal years 14 through 16, 3 fiscal years at the same rate that we pay now, which is $12.40 for personal property description and $13.60 for real property description. The only exception to that is in the second year of the contract, if the vote goes through on personal property, basically scaling back quite a bit of personal property, all properties below 40,000. They do look for a reopener, because that is going to leave them with pretty much all the commercial properties, which would be properties that they would have to do considerably more monitoring of the values. So I would imagine the price is going to go up considerably for the few properties that are left.
Yeah.
But they don't specify how much, they just say we want to talk about it at that point.
Yeah, because the vote is the real indicator of if the vote goes through and it becomes effective.
Any questions of Jane Marie? Have you been satisfied with the services provided by Oakland County?
Very satisfied, as well as I think I probably hear more positively from our business owners than anyone else, how much more satisfied they are than our prior service.
Mm-hmm. Good. A motion would be in order.
I move to approve the contract with Oakland County to provide full assessing services for a per parcel cost of $13.60 per real and $12.40 per personal property parcel.
Support.
Moved by Piana, supported by Martin. Any discussion or additional questions on the item? Madam Clerk.
Councilmembers Piana?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Regular agenda item B is a consideration of post-retirement health care fund investment policy. We've had this before. In April, you want to introduce this item?
I'm actually going
You're
to
gonna-
ask Jane Marie to come back
I'm
up to
not
the podium.
surprised.
So.
Jane Marie? You want to
The city manager asked that I bring this back to your attention. Basically, what has changed in the policy from what was forwarded to you, I believe it was in August, is to make it clear that these funds are being directed to an investment manager like we do for the pension funds. Our recommended investment manager is ICMA RC. They already manage our deferred compensation funds, our defined contribution funds, and a portion of the OPEB funds. The policy basically expands to the extent the law allows for pension and pension-like funds, the types of investments that you make. The policy itself had a little bit of tweaks from before. What we had before was a generic policy, more scripted off where our pension funds allow investments, where the asset allocation on page 5 has now been a little bit more flexible. Again, the problem that I see that we've had with the pension funds is every time there's a little tweaking of the market, we have to come back and get that policy approved again. So this expands some of those high and low ranges, pretty much keeping the same type of class, equity class at 60%, fixed income class at 40%. That should sound very familiar to you all from the pension funds, but just expanding those minimum and maximums within those ranges. Again, to give ICMA more flexibility. The market is ever-changing on us, so to give ICMA RC more flexibility in making the presumed rate of return that we want to achieve, the 7.5%, as what we have in the pension funds.
Are there, well, a motion would be in order before we have discussion, unless there's questions for clarification.
I have 2 questions for clarification, if that's all right.
Yeah.
How often do we take ICMA out to bid for this kind of work? Or do we have a regular schedule that we would do that, or?
We haven't. Oakland County actually went out to bid for the retirement services for their defined contribution program when they began it, and we mimicked them. They have a full body purchasing staff, so we really mimicked them. We had a number of discussions with county staff at the time. We were probably one of the first that entered into the defined contribution arena in municipalities, certainly in the area. And again, their basis being a nonprofit basis, the fee schedules for the investments a little bit more attractive than a for-profit. So again,
Sure. Then my second question, I'm sorry. Then my second question, the policy correctly identifies council as the ultimate fiduciary for these funds as they go forward.
Yes.
And I know we've had different discussions over time about who would review the performance of the fund to see if they were adequately meeting our needs. So do we have a schedule where that's coming to council then moving forward, or are we going to defer that to the other detention boards to review that, or?
they're actually pretty thorough in their quarterly reports that we get now on the defined contribution plans. So that same quarterly reporting would be given to council. You know, I mean, the direct fiduciary responsibility would be with the treasurer, as it has been before, to make sure that the investment manager is following the policy. But the reporting would go to the city council so that, you know, you would be kept advised of, you know, where the fund was on a quarterly basis.
I guess my concern would just be then that, as the wording here says, that council is the ultimate fiduciary responsibility for the fund's investment portfolio, that if there's any aberration in the performance below our target, that we'd want to bring it here and have discussion about it. Would be my suggestion, but otherwise I'm fine.
They do come once a year as well to go over all of our funds. We could make it, when they come to see us as staffers, that we could have them come on the same time that we have a meeting and have them come and give a report as well. And if council finds they want it more than once a year, we'd be happy to accommodate that as well.
I think it comes down to performance. You know, if they're doing fine or exceeding the target, I don't know that they have to, but I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, Councilman Galloway.
Sort of following up on Councilman Martin's comments, on page 3, despite being the ultimate fiduciary, council delegates responsibility to the city manager for ongoing administration. How do you anticipate this relationship going forward on a practical sort of nuts and bolts? I mean, what does ongoing administration mean to you, and what is our role as a body?
Following up with what Councilmember Martin said, that we do have benchmarks that they have to make, and if they're not making them, then we would need to bring forward some other ideas, some other thoughts and ideas or fund movements as well. And again, they do a really thorough job of bringing to us, we meet once a year, and they have a whole portfolio of where we've been with the recommendations and things of that nature, and I would bring them to council as well, and we could even do that for the other funds as well. Just that it happens to be, it's been an internal function, and so we get to see that, but you don't necessarily get to. So we could do that again, and again, our purpose is to make sure that they hit the benchmarks that we provided them.
Well, just given that we are delegating responsibility to your office, yet retain the ultimate responsibility for it, I think there has to be some communication to this body so that if things are going astray, not to suggest that they would, but that we have some understanding of what's going on. Toward that end, also, I guess I'm a little bit confused on how we are measuring success or failure in this. The investment goal.
And what page are you on? Just so
I'm sorry, it's on page.
Just so they know.
Page 4, the top of page 4, investment goal. As I understand, the actuarial assumption or assumed rate of return is 7.5%, and our goal is to do better than the assumed rate of return. So if we hit the assumed rate of return, is that a failure of the management of the fund, or is that what we expect to happen? I mean, or is it if we go less than 10%? I mean, how do we?
It really depends on what the benchmarks are in a quarter. So you're going to get the same type of reporting that you do with the pension systems. What are the benchmarks based on your policy? Have you hit those goals? If you chronically hit below the benchmark, but you make 8%, I don't think you've succeeded. You know, the benchmark is what the S&P 500, what the Russell Index says. So if they're exceeding what we do, but the market happens to be racing in that quarter, I think it's a combination of both making those benchmark, returns and exceeding the 7.5%.
So the actuarial assumptions drive our funding. Well, I mean, our funding of this, right? So if we don't hit 7.5%, well, we're making contributions based upon 7.5% assumed return. But if we're making 10% and our fixed income investments are trailing Barclays Capital Aggregate Index, then we need to reevaluate our relationship with ICMA.
Right. If you're making 10%,
but if Barclays Capital Aggregate Index is making 15.
Right, if the index is making 15 and you're only making 10, because the assumption in the valuation is 7.5%, it's going to lower your contribution if you have a sustained, return of 10%. It is going to reduce your annual contribution over time, but you still are not making the index.
As I understand it, though, there's really two factors if we're funding this fully enough. One, you've got the rate of return to the investments, which we're applying, I think, more liberal investments is what this policy is allowing than we've allowed in the past. But also there's trust that your actuarial tables are correct and that you're funding it at the level that the table that you're comfortable with as you move forward. Either one will throw you off, like you said, and I think that's why, if I'm reading you correctly, I mean, my point, too, is to make sure it comes back when we're the least bit off here so we know before it's a bigger issue.
Right. I mean, there was a concern that we were overfunding in some regards the police and fire pension because of the assumptions we made regarding
wages,
the growth of wages and benefits. And
we fell down on the side of being more conservative and more fully funding that, I suppose, or putting more money into it, whatever that is characterized as. But, so what we're saying this evening is that that's April's job to keep an eye on that and keep us informed of what is going on a regular basis, and we'll evaluate it.
Well, and it's important to look at this and any pension-type fund over the long term, because returns in a single year, you know, I mean, there have been great hills and valleys over the last decade, but the long-term health of the fund, you know, means that you are going to make those actuarial assumptions over time. There have been years when we haven't made the 7.5%, but generally we have made over the index in the pension funds. So, you know, if you have a market that is just not returning, you're not going to make money either. But in the long term, you know, if that 7.5% mark is made, the assumptions of the valuation will bear out over time.
Right.
So from a starting point, adjusting these funds, it's our feeling today that this fund is healthy?
Yes. I mean, to the extent that we have only started funding it since 2001, and we've had employees back to 1927, many from, you know, the 40s are still alive. So, you know, I mean, have we done very well over the last 12 years? You know, I mean, with all OPEB, it would have been preferable to start funding it the day any employee starts working here and you make the long-term promise. But again, we got a jump on this much sooner than many cities in the area, so we're healthier than many.
Other questions of clarification? Otherwise, a motion would be in order.
I would move that we approve the attached investment policy and direct ICMARC to allocate the city's OPEB funds based on the asset allocation provided in the policy.
Support.
Moved by Galloway, supported by Martin. Now, additional questions or comments, concerns on this item?
I'm sorry, I had one additional question. One of the representations we make on here in this policy is that City Council agrees that investing in securities with higher return expectations outweighs their short-term volatility risk. I guess I'd like to understand a little bit why that's the suggested policy decision that we make, and whether the relevance of that, or whether the accuracy of that, whether that's a good conservative statement if we're just starting to fund that now. So, I mean, I assume that since we're just starting to, you know, put monies into this, that there may be some, I mean, cash flow concerns, and so if we have high volatility, how does that play into that policy decision that we're going to go for higher rates of return in exchange for greater volatility?
Well, what we've had in the past has been following the investment policy for much more conservative investing, the type of investing that by law you can do for general funds, special revenue funds, debt funds. Pension funds allow for a wider range of investment options. So by the same standpoint, you cannot expect general funds to return 7.5%. You can expect that for pension funds, because general funds can't, you know, can't invest in stocks, can't invest in the wide range of possibility that pension and pension-like funds can. So there are, you know, stock funds that are a bit more volatile. You certainly wouldn't want your entire concentration of your fund to be in volatile stock, but you would want some of it to be. Again, to capture some of those premium returns rather than typical passbook earnings that you can get from general funds or short-term bonds, repos. You know, those are not going to give you 7.5% returns.
And we're comfortable that this is sufficiently funded and sufficiently liquid to meet all the obligations despite the volatility? that we
Is it
anticipate?
sufficiently funded now? No, it isn't. Not anywhere close. But we've only been putting into the fund for 12 years. This is a long-term fund. The pension funds, were started back in the 40s. This is still in the catch-up phase. Are we making the funding requirements required by the actuarial valuations? Yes. But it is not anywhere close to 100% funded.
Yet we're comfortable with higher levels of volatility that put that principal amount at risk.
Well, you would have small quantities in those higher volatility funds. You wouldn't put 100% of the funds in there. That would never be advisable. But a portion of your funds should be in things that, it's the inverse relationship of risk and return. There's low risk, stable return. You want to have some of your funds in a little bit riskier so that you have the little bit higher returns offset by your bond type funds that have less return but stable return, which is why you have that 60-40 split typically in stocks and bonds.
So we're saying that the conservative position of our portfolio is the bonds and the equities are all of this more volatile.
Typically, stocks are more volatile, yes.
So of the 60-40 mix, the core fixed income fund is the more conservative of the two groupings, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So 60% is in the higher volatility, the 50% in U.S. equities and 10% in international equities.
Yes.
I guess I was comfortable with the 60-40 allocation split, and so when I read that sentence, which Councilman Galloway had also struck me, but I guess I interpreted that as sort of, when they talk about the risk there, they meant that 60%, that language encompasses why we do a 60-40 allocation or a 60% equity split in there, that if we were going to define our policy as not being comfortable with investing in securities with higher returns, that would dictate perhaps a shift in that allocation?
60-40 is pretty much the classic
right.
Pension investment strategy. What this allows for is a little bit widening of those minimums and maximums so that when the market changes, if stocks become more volatile, international tends to be more volatile than anything. When that becomes more volatile, that they can move it from there to stocks or to bonds. So it's allowing the investment manager to be a little bit more flexible to capture changes in the market.
And consequently, in cash, your target 0, which is obviously the most safe and conservative, but you've upped the limit to allow for up to 40% of the portfolio to go into cash in the event that we see a downturn and want to not put more of it there in cash versus.
That we want to protect ourselves from volatility, you put it in cash.
So, I guess I'm concerned, is this investment goal on page 4 intended to be the high-level statement of our investment policy, and then the asset allocation, the more detailed?
I guess that's what I was getting at. What I was trying to say is that's what I assumed that was the high level. We're willing to assume some risk, and by the way, here's the asset allocation to define what the risk is that we're willing to assume. That's
exactly it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the broader statement about our policy doesn't give you flexibility that's not in the asset allocation.
Right.
The second statement's not one we even need, right? It's a statement of opinion. If you're already defining in the classifications what our tolerances are and mins and maxes and everything else, I don't know that statement, if it's causing some level of angst, and I can see why, is even necessary. Could we strike it and be fine?
Sure.
I mean, really, the guiding principle is what we've allowed in the mins and the maxes and the individual funds.
I mean, my concern is I'm not an investment advisor, and without a better understanding than I'll ever be able to obtain on this OPEB stuff, I'm not sure that, given our currently underfunded position, that higher return expectations outweigh short-term volatility risk. I mean, it makes sense what Ms. Eubanks is saying, but I'm not sure in this application that I'm comfortable saying that. And I also, I guess, don't want to have this interpreted sometime suggesting that within this equities mix, we're willing to go in an allocation of equities that is not traditionally applied in pension funding.
Do you see any issue with striking that sentence?
No, but I think the law is pretty clear, and certainly ICMARC is cognizant of what their parameters are under the law. They've been in the business of pension planning for a long time. So I don't know, striking the sentence I don't think really would impact anything. It really is a broad statement that is commonly known of, if you increase your risk, there is the potential for greater deviations from the norm. You may have highs, you may have lows. And really the policy is that section on page 5 of how much we're willing to risk at any one time.
I think to Councilman Galloway's point, I think it's well taken. I mean, it's really a matter of how risk averse or how risk acceptance you are, and I think it goes back to my concern initially that I raised is how frequently are we going to review this? At what point is the trigger do we review this? And the policy clearly lays a responsibility with council to be the fiduciary here. So, I mean, we do need to ask those questions, and I think for them to come and report to us regularly would help, just as we have the pension board set up, which might include our own in-house analysis on how the performance has been thus far. But I just don't want to approve a policy and then have it go away because it hits a target somewhere else, and we don't see it again.
I'm comfortable. I mean, it seems to me that the goal is beating our actuarial assumed rate of return, and I'd like it to end there. I think that's a good fix, that it end there and that we not give investment advice or make statements as body to the ICMA-RC. And while I suspect they weren't reading it as such, I hate for it to come back later on and have someone throw this in a future city council's face as to, what happened to the fund when it assumed greater risk. We're delegating it to you. You're essentially delegating it to ICMA. If they botch it, then,
What I'm thinking is, if you're open to that, is to have ICMA talk to them and see if they can come to a meeting and we can have them answer some of these questions and kind of, help wade through some of the concerns or questions you have and comfort level with them. It's entirely up to you. Doesn't necessarily, you can either approve tonight and still have them come or delay tonight and have them come. But I think they could provide a lot of that direction and information that you're seeking to make your comfort level a little higher.
I personally could go either way with the modifications that you're suggesting. I could approve it, but it depends on comfort levels.
I mean, having them here is fine. I really do. I am comfortable with giving this responsibility to you, however, and that's a relationship that you need to have. So, it's up to council how much you want to get involved in that. But I'm comfortable striking. I prefer striking that sentence because I think it gives an overly broad and sort of misleading perception as to what the council's goals are here. So I think it's worded poorly, if nothing else. But I guess for me personally, anyway, I don't need to see ICMA here, other than knowing that you have the relationship and you're providing regular reports to us.
If I may add to that, unless they start to fall below targets, and then I'd like to see them.
Dan,
Yeah.
Councilman, you had a great point there, yeah, unless we start missing our targets, and then we need to talk to them.
Well, I also would feel better with that language stricken.
Pardon?
With the language stricken.
Got it.
So if
Okay.
somebody wanted to make a motion, we could incorporate that edit.
We have a motion on the table.
Oh,
Someone wants to
you're
make
absolutely right.
an
Councilman Galloway,
amendment.
you made the motion, and Councilman Martin, you supported it. So if you wanted to amend your motion to strike that line,
I would so amend to strike the last sentence in the investment goal paragraph on page 4.
and Councilman Martin, are you amenable to that?
I am.
All right. Any further discussions on this item? Questions? All right, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Lennon?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jane Marie.
And Mayor, was that on the motion to amend, or was that on the principal motion?
Yeah.
You might want
I
It was kind
considered
of an
it.
informal
It was
amendment.
a friendly amendment, a friendly change to his original motion.
Okay, as long as it was
Thank you,
clear.
but thank you for keeping us on track there. Our next item of business would be item C, consideration of the Ferndale Firefighters Association contract. Jenny, are you going to introduce that item? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have before you is the ratified tentative agreement between the City of Ferndale and the Ferndale Firefighters Association. I just want to start off by congratulating our team. Chief Sullivan and the union and I worked together to come up with this agreement, and I really give it to our union board for really putting the pedal to the metal and working with their people to not only communicate the budgetary position that we're in and the constraints that we were working with, but also really to get them to truly understand the meaning of interest-based bargaining and to kind of buy into that approach, in which they did eventually do. So what you have before you is a contract very, very similar, very much in line with what we brought forward for the police and the command contracts, with the exception being some additional concessions in the areas of holiday pay and their cleaning allowance. So it's a 3-year contract, July 1 of this year through June 30th of 2016. And, Chief, do you have anything? Go ahead.
All right. Questions of clarification or a motion would be in order.
There hasn't been any changes since we've met last time.
No,
I
not at all.
understand.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm good.
Questions or a motion would be in order.
I'll move to authorize the attached changes to the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Ferndale and Firefighters Association for the period of July 1, 13 through June 30th, 16.
Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Lennon, supported by Piana. Now, any comments, questions on this item?
Just nice job to all sides, getting an agreement, and our firefighters coming to the table, too. I think this is great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to commend you and the firefighters bargaining unit and the chief. This is wonderful. We have gone too long in the past with open contracts, expired contracts that were not nailed down, and this one is going to be ratified before the last one expires, which is a nice change of pace, and everybody came to the table, I think, with transparency and a willingness to look at the situation as it exists. And thank you, Jenny, and thanks everybody for your efforts on this. We don't have a lot to talk about because it happens behind the scenes, but it's a big deal when we can get, especially police and firefighters represent our 2 largest bargaining units, and these have historically been more difficult. So, Jenny, also kudos to you. I think it speaks to the wiseness of having an HR director on our staff. Appreciate it. All right, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Galloway?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Thanks, everybody. Item D, Councilwoman Galloway pulled, is a resolution for...
What did you call me?
What did I say? Galloway?
Councilwoman Galloway.
Councilwoman Piana, I'm sorry, you added this to the agenda, Councilwoman Piana, Mayor Pro Tem Piana, a resolution for responsible spending of transportation funds in Southeast Michigan. Would
Yes.
you like to explain that? for us?
Yes, thank you for allowing
And
me.
just let me also say, because this wasn't in our original packet for the residents, this is online. You can find this online, or will be able to, after this evening, on our city website if you want to view the verbiage for yourself.
Yep, thank you for putting on the agenda at the last minute. I'm introducing something that Ferndale City Council considered approximately almost 8-9 years ago. The city passed a resolution stating their displeasure with expanding I-75, adding a lane each way. At the time, in 2004, and I'm asking that the City Council pass another resolution making pretty much the same statements. And here's why. Why is it still in? Why am I coming back after almost 10 years to ask to put a stop to this project? SEMCOG, which we are a member of, is required to develop a 2040 regional transportation plan. And this plan is required by the federal government to receive federal funding. And this plan is updated every 5 years, which is why I'm coming back to council in support of this resolution, because it's still in the plan. And I think, and this also includes highway expansion on I-94, a lane each way. And the total cost of both of these projects for the region is $5.8 billion, and that's more than the total spent on all repaving projects in the region. So that's basically, these two projects are 16% of the total cost of transportation spending in the region. And I think when these projects were put in the plan almost 15, 20 years ago, the assumptions were that highway travel was increasing and that congestion was getting worse. And we know from our regional demographics that we have decreased in population as a region as a whole, and I believe that our assumptions need to be revisited. And this resolution is basically saying, let's rethink regionally why we need these projects and spend the expansion dollars somewhere else. So these two projects, the $5.8 billion, does include restructuring. I'm not saying that these highways don't need to be restructured. They do. Some of them need new bridges. About 10 to 20% of that is for expansion. So let's repurpose and redirect that money to the long list of projects. We have a region that are unfunded, and sort of keep it to a fix-it-first policy. So we know we don't have enough money to pay for our road projects now. Let's not expand and try to maintain something we don't even have money for. So that's sort of where I'm asking City Council to look at this now. So if you indulge me, I will read it. Communities across Southeast Michigan face an acute shortage of transportation funds to repair existing streets and bridges, address safety needs, and provide the quality of life that attracts and retains residents and employers. The draft 2040 Regional Transportation Plan, prepared by the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, includes major highway reconstruction and capacity expansion projects on I-75 in Oakland County and I-94 in Detroit, with expected costs to exceed $5.8 billion, including hundreds of millions for capacity expansion. The long-range plan states that traffic congestion in Southeast Michigan is limited, and that the region will not regain its 2,000 population within the next 25 years, and that any increase in traffic levels will be modest. And surveys performed by SEMCOG show that a majority of the region's residents do not support raising taxes for the purpose of expanding highway capacity. And the expansions threaten significant negative impacts to communities that they traverse, particularly Hazel Park, including displacement of residents, destruction of local tax base, increases in traffic noise, aggravated air pollution, and continued disinvestment. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Ferndale City Council opposes the inclusion of these highway capacity expansion projects in the 2040 long-range plan unless and until a full reexamination of them shows they are necessary and that no preferable alternative exists. Be it further resolved that the funding currently programmed for these capacity projects be redirected to other roadway projects, such as preventative maintenance and rehabilitation of existing major roads and bridges, addressing critical safety needs and enhancing the quality of life. Further be it resolved that this resolution be transmitted to SEMCOG, the Michigan Department of Transportation, and the City of Ferndale state legislators in advance of SEMCOG's June 20th, 2013 General Assembly meeting. On this date, members of SEMCOG will vote to move forward on the 2040 plan or not. And I think it's important that Ferndale makes it known that these projects should be reconsidered in terms of their assumptions and whether or not our region really needs to expand highway capacity. I do want to mention, this is asked frequently, can we use this money to do mass transit development? And you cannot. You cannot take money out of the federal highway funds to do transportation. So while we would all love that to happen, not in this case. But let's fix what we already have and not build something we can't afford to maintain.
So is that a motion?
Yes. So I move to pass this resolution as stated.
Thank you. Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Piana, supported by Galloway.
Martin. No, that's fine. That doesn't
Both
matter. I didn't
jumped
hear
in.
him.
I
Okay,
gave
that's
it to
cool.
Galloway. Sorry.
You lose, Dan.
I don't need to win.
Questions on
I
this?
just didn't hear.
I had one, but Melanie answered. I just want to make sure the funds were being diverted to fix what we currently have.
That's what we're asking them to
See
do.
the billboards, fixourroadsnow.com.
There you go.
Okay, very good. So that's been asked and answered.
Other questions or comments? I was on the county commission when this came up, and you and Ferndale originally passed their resolution in opposition, and we did the same thing, and it was striking to me. We had a good, full, robust debate about this. The county administration under Brooks Patterson was adamantly in favor of this expansion, and made the argument that if we expanded I-75 one lane in each direction, that we could reduce the time it takes to get from M59 to 8 Mile by 9 minutes. So for 9 minutes of savings, we would pay, I forget what the fee, the final total was that time, but $5.8 billion with a B now is not worth 9 minutes of quicker travel time. I thought, so I applaud you for bringing this forward, Councilwoman Piana, and I heartily endorse it.
Well, thank you very much. And there's also something also about induced demand, that if you build the highways, you think you're adding time or shortening the time, but what happens is that you add more cars there, and then it goes back to what it was. And so you're not really alleviating traffic congestion. So and there's lots of science out there about that phenomenon. So.
And even though these dollars aren't directly related to the public transportation dollars, that's a separate investment, but it's an investment that we were beginning to make in this region, which should theoretically take more cars off the road,
Yep.
regardless of where our population goes in the next 25 years. So it does play an important role in helping to reduce traffic congestion as well.
It may have made sense 15, 20 years ago, but it may not make sense now. So, thank you.
All right, if there's no other comments or questions, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Martin?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. So we have two items that were removed from the consent agenda, formerly consent agenda item 5D, approval of the agreement with Republic Parking for up to 90 days for a flat fee of $2,000 a month to be charged to the auto parking fund. And Councilman Martin, I believe you removed that item.
I did. I had a couple concerns with relation to it. I don't mind that we're engaging them because I think they've already been helping us to a degree and have kind of proved their value. I have two concerns. One, there seems to be a discrepancy in what's being asked for. I know the city manager is asking for 90 days at a fee of $2,000 per month. The letter from Republic says this proposal is good for 6 months at $2,000 a month. So I don't want there to be a discrepancy in that. And I'd also look for any time we engage in a contractor like this that we have a statement of work that clarifies specifically what we're having them do and that the cost will go up to and not exceed $2,000 a month, which it doesn't say that as well. So we've got a discrepancy in the time that the proposal is good for between what we're asking for and what they're willing to approve. And then I'd just like to see more of a statement of work. Now, that being said, I think these services are valuable, we need to do it. I don't need to come back here, but I would be open to, I'd be okay with it if we adjusted the amendment to say, upon receipt of a statement of work accommodating those points that the city attorney is comfortable with, then we can move forward. We don't necessarily have to bring it back, but there's just a couple spots in here I'm uncomfortable approving as it stands today.
And it is just not, it's 90 days.
It is 90 days. That's your
6 months, and I
intent.
said I just needed 90,
Okay,
so.
all right. I'm just, you know.
Yep, no, I appreciate that.
Sometimes
I
they
saw
quote a
that.
price and you're like, well, now it's this for this, you know.
Nope.
Yep, good point. Okay, so would you like to make that motion, Councilman?
Yeah, absolutely. Hang on, let me get there. So I would move that we approve the agreement between the City of Ferndale and Republic Parking for up to 90 days for a flat fee not to exceed $2,000 a month from Auto Parking Fund in account number 585.000.818 with the condition that the changes we've requested be received and found acceptable by the city attorney.
Is there support?
I support.
Moved by Martin, supported by Piana. Other questions or comments on that item? I think those were good catches, Councilman, and I appreciate you bringing those forward. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Piana.
Yes.
Lennon.
Yes.
Galloway.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Coulter.
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Moving on to the second formerly consent agenda item, formerly H, approval of the scope of services provided by the Greenway Collaborative charged to the Parking Auto Fund and authorization for the mayor to execute the contract in the amount of $52,160, subject to the conditions stipulated by the city attorney. And Councilwoman Piana, you asked to have that removed.
I pulled this because I wanted to acknowledge that we're making progress on what I think is an important project for the community, and it's also very timely. This multimodal plan sort of is, in my opinion, well, it's my opinion, but it's also in our ordinance, our Complete Streets ordinance that we passed in October of 2010 that says that we needed to create a multimodal transportation plan that accommodated, looked at our streets to see how we can make them safer and accommodate all of our users. And with the master plan going on right now for the Woodward corridor, as well as the alternative analysis for mass transit, I think it's just very timely that the city is moving forward with this proposal to look at all our streets, not just the downtown, but every single street in the city of Ferndale to see how we can improve the experience people have using our network, our street network. So basically, I just want to say thank you to Derek for moving this forward. We also had an advisory proposal team, someone from the Planning Commission and staff, and I was on that proposal team. We reviewed 6 proposals, and I believe this is one of the best ones. The Greenway Collaborative contract, they absolutely know what they're doing, and they are already doing some work on the Woodward corridor, so I think we're getting the best bang for our buck. And leveraging their expertise about what they're collecting from our neighboring communities. So I just wanted to say thanks to Derek. I think this is in the right direction. This is fulfilling one of our goals that council set for 2012. It's just taken a little bit longer to get it here. So I'm really pleased that we are moving forward. And one other thing in the proposal, we are looking about how kids are getting to school as part of the school programs for this multi-transportation plan. So I think we have an opportunity to work with the school district in a more dynamic way than we have in the past.
Thanks, Mount. And I see Derek has risen, and he has looks like he has a guest with him. Do you want to introduce who you have with you, Derek?
Absolutely. First, good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
We'd be glad to introduce Mr. Cox. We're excited to be here. The multimodal plan and the RFP that went out was something that evolved over the last year or so as we had continued discussions with Council, with the DDA, with everybody involved in non-motorized and multimodal transportation in the city. The RFP evolved to be something, started off as a bike plan, a bicycle plan for the city, and has evolved into what I consider to be, or have the potential to be, almost a complete thoroughfare plan in the city. Evaluate all modes of transportation and how they connect with each other within the city. It became very apparent through this process that council and all of the interested stakeholders in the community want Ferndale to be a place that recognizes all modes of transportation and becomes a place that allows all modes to use the roadway system equitably. And we believe this RFP represents a great step forward in that. We are glad to introduce Norm Cox. He is the head of the Greenway Collaborative and has done projects like this all over southeast Michigan and the state, I believe, at this point, and currently is working on a very similar plan in Birmingham. So we think it's not only timely, we think we have the right people on board and an opportunity to do something that hopefully will create a more equitable situation for all users of our system. So we're here to answer any questions, but now or in the future. So thank you.
Derek?
Yeah.
Oh, I did have one question about the recommended action. It says revise paragraph 4, limiting this obligation to the information, surveys, reports, and professional recommendations which are in the city's possession or control. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I can, but I would prefer to let the city attorney, that was his recommendation. I believe it just means that we are responsible for providing only those things which we currently have in possession, not anything in addition. But
like we're not going to create another new plan and RFP to augment any work that we're doing? Okay.
Or require any additional survey that the city wouldn't otherwise already have.
Just a clarification.
Okay.
Any questions of either of these gentlemen while they're standing?
I do have a question, but I'm not sure it's for you two. I'm fully supportive of this plan, but why are we charging it to the auto parking fund?
Actually, I think that is for me, because I'm probably the one who recommended that to begin with, and we have discussed it with the advisory committee that's related to it. As part of the ongoing discussion and evolution of this project and listening to council, one of the things that became very clear is that they wanted the entire transportation system looked at for ways to improve and alleviate pressure on the city's downtown parking system. And one of the ways to do that is to significantly improve different modes of transportation within the downtown and connections to the rest of the city, attractors, and surrounding communities. So in reviewing the language that created the auto parking fund, it does give council the ability to use that money to improve the system in any way it sees fit. We believe this plan is most appropriately paid for from that system because it allows the users of the parking system to help us evaluate the rest of our system and improve those connections. So we think it's appropriate and for the payment for the plan.
So ultimately, what percentage of this plan is going to help improve parking downtown? And the only reason I kind of dwell on this is because we have specific, maybe not specific, we have targeted goals for that fund. And I think every time we chip away at it and erode with it with something else, we get farther away from that is my concern. And the auto parking fund's already taken a hit this year based on other challenges we've had. So why not? Is it not, if it's a universal city opportunity, why are we not paying for it out of our base fund or something else?
Well, again, you could make the same statement about any set of funds in the city related to what they're set aside for. We certainly have no problem if council believes that portions of this plan should be paid for from other funds. But we felt out of all the funds that are available and identified, that this one was the most appropriate at this time. As far as the percentage of it, I don't think there's any way to calculate up front. It would depend on, we would need to know in advance what projects were going to be recommended for implementation and then ultimately what projects were implemented before we were able to say what percentage of the plan actually impacted the downtown parking. But we have no way of discerning between those percentages now and believe this was the most appropriate fund at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Why don't I make a motion so we can talk about it a little bit more?
Sure.
I have some comments that aren't questions. Okay?
Yes.
I move that City Council approves the scope of services provided by the Greenway Collaborative to be paid out of the city's auto parking fund and authorizes the mayor and city council to execute the contract in the amount of $52,160 subject to the following conditions. I'm not going to read them.
Yep.
That you're not changing them.
But I'm not changing them.
Okay. Thank you. Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Piana, supported by Lennon. All right, now for comments and additional questions.
I appreciate Councilman Martin's concern about moving in the direction to increase one of the city's and DDA's goals of increasing parking capacity. But I see our approach for solving some of our parking challenges as a two-pronged approach, which I've said before is reducing demand and increasing supply. You need to do that at the same time, and which is why I'm supportive of having this pay for this plan out of the auto parking fund, because I think folks, if they knew, if we had a plan in place and started putting money towards making it safer for people to get downtown and other modes of transportation, that we will start to reduce demand. And once we get transit, which I think bus rapid transit along Woodward, we'll have a really different kind of conversation about parking demand. I also feel that we have a goal of increasing supply, and we've talked about a parking deck, but it's on City Council's agenda to figure out what to do with that this year. So we don't have a set financial goal per se, other than based off of a plan that the DDA put forth a couple of years ago. And I think the market's changing. We could have a developer come in, put a different proposal in front of us that could alter how much we would need to raise for the parking deck. So needless, that doesn't mean that we don't need to save. I'm just saying that some of the circumstances that were in place a couple of years ago in terms of figuring out what we needed to raise may have changed, may be changing. So that's kind of how I see both of it. It helps us do both parallel paths. In addition, I'm not willing to take it out of the general fund, which I think we could do a 50-50 split. That's another option.
All right, I'm sorry. Could you clarify that you would do a 50-50 split?
I'm not willing to.
Oh, I thought you said you were. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not willing to.
Again, I'm fully supportive of the plan. Please, understand, again, but with our parking situation this year, this is already a fund that's had some distress this year. And so
right, but
I'm just trying to find the right way to spend the money to do that.
Right. Well, I have also asked for the revenue that we've raised through the quarter meters, and we haven't received how much revenue we've been receiving through the quarter meters, and we don't really know how much revenue we're receiving through the new meters because of some of the challenges, and we're taking a wait and see to see what with the meters to see what we're going to be raising. So I feel like that hasn't been determined either, for the long-term projection of the auto parking fund's revenue from these new meters.
I would agree, which in my mind raises even more questions.
Right. I mean, and if I can just interject, we haven't been crystal clear about the goals and the specific intents of the auto parking fund. And I hear what you're saying, Councilwoman, that it really, whenever you decide what that plan and those goals are, it's a moment in time that's changing based on the trends in parking and whatnot. But it does strike me that it's probably time to at least take a moment in time. I'm wondering if perhaps our administration could. Where are we in terms of how long we've been with the new parking system? I don't want to be too quickly into it, but we got to be up on 2 to 3 months. Closing in on that, right?
On June 25th, it'll be 90 days, so that's when we hope to do. We plan on doing a presentation to give you an overview of where we're at. Would
that presentation be able to include, and again, we'd only be 90 days into it, but possible potential revenue trends, as well as then allow us to have a debate on where potential expenditures, at least in this moment of time, what we see as goals for that fund?
Yes and no, and we can take what we know from data from last year. It's just June, July, and August, and September are our busiest months as well, but we can take percentage increases. We can have that conversation. I haven't had a chance to really start looking at how that will look, but we can do the best we can with the data we have.
It strikes me as a conversation that we keep talking about having and not having, and at some point we probably need to put a little bit more clarity around the goals and revenues and expenses of the parking fund.
Well, I agree with the mayor on that, but for the same token, there's not money going into the general fund on a semi-regular basis. but there is money going into the auto parking fund on a semi-regular basis. So until we get some data provided to us, I'm perfectly happy with using the auto parking fund to fund this project.
At a later date, when we get more data, is reallocation an option?
Absolutely.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a good compromise.
Pardon me?
That's a good compromise if we need to take it.
Because I think it will bring some clarity to
Yes.
this discussion.
And I'm willing-
No question about it. And so the time frame then you're thinking is?
I would like to make that presentation at the July 8th meeting. That gives me plenty of time after the 90 days is over to take my time to analyze the data. We've been doing it bi-weekly or weekly, but in this context of this conversation.
Okay, then personally, I'm comfortable with passing this resolution tonight, especially knowing that we can adjust that as the data tells us otherwise, and with you coming back on July 8th to our July 8th presentation to talk a little bit more specifically about the fund. Any other comments or discussion on this item? If not, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Scalloway?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you. That item is adopted. Before I go to call to council, I know that there's a school board member here who I think was a little late for call to audience, but in the spirit of our new collaborative partnership with our schools, not new, but improving, Amy, I know you wanted to come and give some kudos today.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate it. It speaks to the, what's the word? Efficiency of the council that I missed call to audience.
It was earlier in the agenda than it usually is.
Okay, so I asked April earlier today if we could display this picture. I wanted to come and I have three things that I want to talk about, but the first thing is this one. This is a picture of your chambers, if you don't quite notice or recognize. These are second and third graders who, from Kennedy School, who were here for their camp, their second, third grade camp, and they were learning about citizenship, and this was in particular about learning about voting. Obviously, they're all at the tables voting, and the city clerk and her staff were so generous with their time. They actually got to use the voting machines. They used real ballots and used the machines, and the kids loved it. They voted on their favorite ice cream. They voted on their favorite singer, and they had a few ballot initiatives, one of which was, should there be a 3-day weekend?
I'm guessing that passed.
I think that one did pass, yes. So I just really, really, really wanted to express our appreciation for the city's appreciation with this. The kids really loved it, and it was just such a valuable lesson, and so I wanted to do that. Secondly, of course, I can't pass up the opportunity to plug the Ferndale School District's strategic planning process, which is going on right now. I know there's a few of you up there that have been participating. I know there's some people in the audience that have been participating in some of our champions meetings. We do have one left on Wednesday, June 19th. I think it's at 6:30. The information is on the district website.
It is.
And so I encourage everyone to please participate if you can. Lastly, I wanted to just talk about a subject related to parking. Is that allowed?
Of course. For you, yes.
There is a class over at Ferndale High School that there's some design students over there that participated in redesigning some of the old meters. I don't know if this has been mentioned at all before, but evidently they are going to be on display during a fundraiser for the Art Town. Okay, so that's on June 21st, so I don't know if that's already been plugged. Okay, so I just wanted to call attention to that we did have some students so I'm very interested in seeing what they came up with those old parking meters, which is a great Ferndale normal thing to do, to recycle those old meters.
Truly.
So.
And another good reason to go to the Art Town party a week from Friday, correct, Christina? Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for
coming.
fitting me in, Mayor.
More than happy to. Appreciate it. All right, next item of business is call to council. I see the police chief in the back. Chief Collins, anything for the good of the city this evening? Nothing. All right. Jenny, anything else from an HR perspective? Jenny Longthorne, our Director of HR.
I just wanted to update council on our progress with our Weight Watchers program. We just started our 4th session, and I'm happy to announce we've added 5 new members, so we have 20 participants this time. And actually this week we're projected to hit a total of 800 pounds lost with our group.
Really impressive.
We're very, very, very excited about that. Our goal is to come back at the end of this session with some data and kind of get creative with some ways that we can advertise our program and really kind of put us in the spotlight as it relates to our success. So,
congratulations. That's great. Lloyd Curtin, anything for the good of the city this evening? Nothing. She covered all the 9-mile stuff for you already, right? All right. Christine, anything else? I know you. Nope. Yep. All right. Fire Chief Sullivan, anything for the good of the community this evening?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'd just like to let you know that Oak Park had an issue with a high-speed chase hitting another car at about 85 miles an hour, and their jaws of life failed, so they called for Ferndale to assist them. And our guys went in and were able to remove the 2 adults trapped in the vehicle. Sadly, the passenger did perish. She had substantial injuries to herself, but we were able to get in there because used to be a golden hour for trauma, is now like a titanium half hour to get them into trauma surgery, and they were jammed up with their jaws breaking down on them. So we were able to saw the thing off and pull her out and still get her into trauma surgery in time, but she still perished. But nevertheless, it was just a cooperative effort trying to help people out when they were in really bad shape. But our guys did a great job. Pat Sheehan was the crew leader that day, and we pulled off a pretty amazing feat, which the public safety director of Oak Park was very appreciative. And we also had a house fire 2 weeks before that we put out for them. It was right across the border. So we were there first, and we knocked that down. That man had first, second-degree burns, which would remind me to tell everyone, when you're messing with your barbecue grills, make sure all the connections are tight. He had a loose connection, igniting his barbecue grill, igniting him, and then he went into the house, igniting the rest of his house. So he lost his house, his garage, his car.
That was Mr. Kaplan, was it not?
Second-degree burns. So it's just one of those things. Watch the safety of your propane gas grills or natural gas grills if they're hooked to the house. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good work, Chief. Appreciate it. Yep, good work as always. And Sherlyn, anything from who am I forgetting? I always do it. Joe, I'm sorry. I see the Recreation Department Director. I almost skipped over you. Sorry, Joe.
Good evening. Just a couple quick announcements. We are currently registering for our summer day camp that starts June 24th and runs through August 16th. For kids ages 5 to 12, they must have completed kindergarten. Camp runs Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. We do provide aftercare from 3 to 5:30 for an additional fee. Each week offers a different theme, crafts, activities, field trips, swimming, and a ton of fun and different activities. In addition, we are also, for the second year, a site for the school's free summer food program, which will run June 24th through August 16th. We'll be serving breakfast daily, Monday through Friday, from 9:45 to 10:45, and lunch from 11:45 to 12:45. Last year, we served just over 1,000 meals out of the Kulik Center, and we're hoping to meet and beat that this year.
That's fantastic. Are you the only site in the city? We do it at some schools too, don't we?
Mm-hmm. I know the high school. There's I think 5 or 6 different locations.
We should get that information up on the television and the website as well. That's a really critical program that we hope people take advantage of.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for reminding us, Joe. Sorry I skipped over you. Sherlyn, have I missed anyone else?
I don't believe so.
Anything from the clerk's office this evening?
Yes. At this point, all the council members have returned to me individually their performance evaluations of the city manager and their comments on the progress of goals. So my question is, how would you like me to handle the next step? Where do we go from here?
I thought there was one more we had to do.
There's a 360 evaluation that is now being distributed, correct?
Correct.
All right.
And
So
we'll be looking at the
includes
completion, yes, that includes you, staff members, direct reports, and peers. We look for the completion of that by the end of next week. Wow. So, we'd be ready to move forward depending on how you would like to take the next step.
I think the next step would be to compile the results from all of those into one document, and then at that point, it would be ready for delivery.
Delivery to council?
Yeah.
Do you want it to be an agenda item?
Well,
No,
the city manager, I believe,
City
has her
manager-
option
yes,
of how she wants that handled. I know you do. And April, have you decided how you want that handled?
I would prefer that to be in closed session.
In closed session, all right. And so if you would compile that data for us, and then once it's compiled and at the next appropriate council meeting, we will do a closed session where we will, as a group.
I think there's some prep work prior to that, though, and we need to decide as we review it who's delivering that, and to take a look at it prior to that meeting.
Be more specific.
I'd like you to look at it prior to the meeting
Look at
and
it.
make sure you're comfortable with the comments and feedback that's there. It's just another set of eyes to make sure that it's presented in an objective manner.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good, thank you.
Happy to do that.
You can delegate that, but someone needs to do it.
I appreciate that, thank you. And you have more experience with that, so I appreciate it, and I'd be happy to do that. Good. Anything else from the clerk's office? Thank you for taking the lead with that.
No
We've
problem.
let that slip a little bit, and I know April's beginning to wonder what.
People have been very, very busy in City Hall.
Yeah, but it's an important step to make sure we're all on the same page. So, April, anything else from the
I
city
do,
manager's
actually.
office?
As you know, over the course of the last year, one of the council's goals actually was to review and revisit our labor council. And that has actually gone out on RFP. And just to help council understand, that's actually your appointment. So what I wanted to talk about real quickly here is, of course, Jenny and I would love to be part of that process since we have the most interaction with our labor attorney, but with council being the appointing body of that particular attorney, I'd like to offer as well to bring council in on the interview process and the selection part of the labor council. We could have two people if you want.
I think it would be appropriate to have two members of council in on that,
And then we could bring that with Jenny. Jenny and I will help lead that process with the two people who are selected, and then bring back a recommendation to the board, or even at least to me initially about the process and things of that nature. So if that's comfortable for you, then I would just need two volunteers.
Council is amenable. I would suggest that we appoint two members of our body to sit on that interview team, along with April and Jenny and anyone else? No? Just
Probably just four of us for now.
I'll go ahead and sit on that.
What's the timing?
Councilman
What's
Lennon
your-
would like to serve on that. The timing?
Well, the request for proposals are due at the end of the month, so it's a lot of information to wade through. So more than likely, what Jenny and I will do is create a report of a summary of all of the different proposals. I had done this once in Ypsilanti. We had almost 20 proposals, so it's never apples to apples. So we'll get that data collected. I would think that by the middle of July, toward the end of July, we would be able to start meeting regarding the proposals we have and select 3 or 4 candidates we want to interview and go from there.
We have one attorney on council. It maybe makes some, I'm throwing out the possibility that it might make sense to have an attorney interview attorneys.
You happy to do that?
If council is amenable to that.
Is that like legal's worst nightmare?
Suddenly, no one wants to be on that committee.
So I'm sensing that perhaps we're open to having Councilman Lennon and Councilman Galloway serve along with April and Jenny on an interview team for a labor attorney. I'm looking around. Do we need a motion to do that? Probably wouldn't hurt. If someone would make that motion, we might as well just do it officially and form the committee. But I can't.
I'd move that Councilman Galloway and Councilman Lennon serve on the committee to assist in the selection of the next labor attorney firm.
Okay, so motion by Martin. Is there support?
I support.
Supported by Piana. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Council members Piana?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yeah.
Martin?
Yeah.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes. That item is adopted, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else, April?
No, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Anything from the city attorney this evening?
Nothing tonight.
All right. Councilman Martin, anything from your neck of the woods?
No, nothing.
Councilman
I
Martin.
just want to commend you on what you're doing, along with Mr. Levin.
Thank you.
On
We'll talk a little bit about that, but
Yeah, I know you're dying for a Big Mac, but you can hang in there.
I know, $4.50 goes a
But
long
it's
way.
very, yeah, very commendable. I applaud
It
you.
is.
Appreciate it.
You're going to eat a lot of peanut butter.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have nothing else.
All right, thanks. Councilwoman Piana.
No, I have nothing tonight, thank you.
All right, Councilman Galloway.
Nothing tonight.
Wow. Then me, I will just, in reference to what Councilman Lennon said, Congressman Levin and I today accepted the food challenge, and there's drastic cuts being proposed to the food assistance program in Washington. And, you know, if you know me, I don't get my nose out of issues that don't specifically relate to Ferndale government very often, but this is a very, I think, important issue in our country, and there's a number of Ferndale residents who get food assistance, and the House is proposing cutting $20 billion from the SNAP program, and that's just indefensible to me. So Congressman Levin and I, in order to bring more attention and awareness to this issue, went shopping this morning at Ferndale Foods. And the average person on food assistance eats $4.50 worth of food a day, or $31.50 a week. And so we bought our groceries this morning, and starting Wednesday morning, so I'm not hungry yet, but starting Wednesday morning for a week, we're going to live on the food that we bought at Ferndale Foods this morning, at Ferndale Food.
I just want to let you know Marnie's got Krispy Kremes back there, so you might as
I
well
can
dig
do
in
those
right
tonight.
now.
And you're right, it includes a lot of oatmeal and pasta, and the harder part that, even harder than buying food for that much money is buying healthy options, and that was a challenge, but I've got my food and I'm ready to go, and I'm going to start on Tuesday. So thank you. And even though you don't have to lobby our congressman on this issue, if you wanted to send a note to Congress or to our Senate or anybody in Washington that you know that these cuts are inexcusable, this would be a good time to do it, because these cuts are part of the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill is going to get taken up in the House starting next week, which is why the timing of our efforts. So thanks for bringing that up, and I look forward to doing it. And with that, our meeting is
No, Mayor,
not
Mayor,
adjourned.
May I make a motion?
Yes, you may make a motion, Councilman.
I move that we go into closed sessions for the purpose of holding a strategy negotiation session connected with negotiation of collective bargaining agreements pursuant to MCL 15.268, Section 8C, and to consult with our attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with a specific pending litigation pursuant to 15.268, Section 8E, and to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute pursuant to 15268, Section 8H.
All right, motion by Lennon. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Martin. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Council members Martin?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Mayor Coulter?
Yes, thank you, and we are in closed session.
We gonna do that in here, Dan, or you want to go next door?